The champagne glass felt heavy in my hand as Rachel grabbed my wrist and dragged me across the wedding hall. "Ms. Johnson," she chirped in that fake voice she used for important people. "Meet my new father-in-law, David. Well, let's just say he's taking some time off from work." The way she said it made my stomach turn. But what came next was worse, much worse. "Actually," she whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "he's been out of work for months now. Total deadbeat, really." If you're watching this, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're from. Now let me explain how I ended up standing in this fancy hotel, wearing my best suit, while my son's new wife called me a deadbeat in front of her boss. It started when Tommy announced he was marrying Rachel Stevens. I should have trusted my gut feelings back then, but parents do crazy things when they see their kids happy. Tommy met Rachel at some business party downtown. She worked at Johnson Marketing Solutions, bragging about being their top salesperson with her own parking spot and everything. She made sure everyone knew how important she was, especially during family dinners where she'd check her phone every 5 minutes. "Sorry, guys," she'd say without looking up. "When you're crushing sales targets, the calls never stop." The wedding planning was a total disaster from the start. Rachel had opinions about everything: the flowers, the cake, where people sat, and especially what I should do during the ceremony. "I think David should stay in the background," she told Tommy while I was right there. "He doesn't really understand how business networking works." Business networking. Like I hadn't spent 25 years building my own company from nothing. But I kept quiet because Tommy was glowing whenever he looked at her. My boy, my only child, seemed so happy. If Rachel made him smile like that, I'd figure out how to deal with her attitude. What I didn't expect was for her to use our family's biggest day as a chance to embarrass me in public. Standing there watching her boss's face change as she spoke, I knew something big was about to happen. The game was just starting. Ms. Johnson's eyes went wide like she'd seen a ghost. She was a tall woman in her 40s, the type who probably worked out at expensive gyms and ate salads for lunch. Her handshake was quick and cold, like she wanted to escape this conversation as fast as possible. "Out of work," she repeated, looking between Rachel and me. "I see." I could almost hear Rachel celebrating in her head. She thought she'd successfully made me look like the family failure in front of her boss. Probably figured it would make her look better by comparison. What she didn't know was that I'd been watching her little performance all night, noting every mean comment, every little power move she made. And what she definitely didn't know was my real identity. "Well," I said with my biggest smile, "that's certainly one way to put it." Rachel's grip on my arm got tighter. She wanted me to disappear now that she'd made her point, but I wasn't ready to leave just yet. "Tell me, Ms. Johnson," I continued, "how's business treating you these days?" Her face brightened a little. "Oh, you know how it goes. The market's tough. Everyone thinks they can do marketing now with the internet and social media. We're constantly fighting to prove we're worth what we charge." "That must be really hard when you're competing against bigger companies," I said thoughtfully. "Organizations with more money and better connections." Rachel's head snapped toward me, probably wondering how some unemployed guy knew anything about business competition. Ms. Johnson nodded eagerly. "Exactly. There's this one company, Mitchell Industries. They've been dominating everyone for years. Huge client list, amazing reputation. Their owner is supposed to be some kind of genius, though nobody really knows much about him. Very private guy." The irony was so perfect, I almost started laughing right there. Instead, I just smiled and said, "How interesting." Rachel was looking back and forth between us with growing confusion, probably wondering how her loser father-in-law was keeping up in a business conversation with her boss. The wedding band started playing, and Tommy swept Rachel onto the dance floor for their first married dance. I watched from my table, sipping champagne that had gone warm 20 minutes ago. The happy couple looked perfect together, him in his sharp black suit, her in a dress that probably cost more than most people make in a month. But perfect things often hide problems underneath, and I was starting to see cracks everywhere. "She's beautiful," said Mr. Garcia, the old man sitting next to me. He'd been Rachel's high school teacher, though she'd barely said hello during the greeting line. "Though I have to say, she's changed quite a bit since she was 16. "People do change," I replied carefully, "though sometimes I think people just become more of who they always were, just with fancier words. Of course, son, it's just—" Mr. Garcia leaned closer, dropping his voice. "She used to be such a kind girl, always helping classmates with homework, standing up for the quiet kids. I wonder what happens to that kindness when we grow up. I glanced at Rachel, who was laughing at something Tommy whispered to her. For a moment, she looked truly happy, and I could almost see that 16-year-old who helped her classmates. Then the song ended, and she immediately started scanning the room, probably looking for more important people to impress at her own wedding reception. That's when I saw her heading straight for the Williams family table. Robert Williams owned the biggest real estate company in 3 counties, and his wife Susan ran half the charity events in town. Rachel had done her homework. She knew exactly who mattered in this room, and she was working it like a professional conference. I excused myself from Mr. Garcia and decided to get some fresh air. But instead of going to the bathroom, I slipped out onto the hotel's back patio. The October night was perfect, cool enough for my jacket, warm enough to be comfortable. I needed time to think, to process what had just happened and figure out my next move. That's when I heard voices around the corner. Rachel's voice specifically, talking to someone on her phone. "No, Sarah, it went perfectly. I made sure Johnson knows I'm not like these small-town people, especially the father-in-law." You should have seen her face when I told her about him. A pause, then laughter. "Trust me, after tonight, she'll see me as the professional one in this family." I stayed on that patio for 10 more minutes, listening to Rachel make 2 more calls. One to someone she called honey, which was weird since she just married my son, and another to her brother. Telling the same story about how she'd successfully put me in my place in front of her boss. Each time she told it, the story got bigger, turning me from unemployed to completely useless to basically pathetic. The thing about hearing things you're not supposed to hear is that it changes you. Not because of what you learn about other people, but because of what you learn about yourself. Standing there in the shadows, listening to my son's new wife tear me apart for fun, I realized I'd been playing a character for months. The nice father-in-law, the guy who didn't want to cause problems, the polite man who'd step aside for the younger generation. But that guy was fake, and fake things only work if everyone agrees to believe them. When I finally went back to the reception, the cake had been cut and people were starting to leave. The older relatives were making their excuses, talking about long drives home and early mornings. I found Tommy at the bar, loosening his tie and looking happily tired. "Dad, there you are. I was looking for you. Rachel wanted to introduce you to more of her work friends." "How thoughtful of her," I said, taking the beer he offered me, "though I think I've met enough of her colleagues for one night." Tommy frowned slightly. "Is everything okay? You seem different." Smart boy. He'd always been able to read my moods, even as a kid. "Just tired, son. It's been a big day." I patted his shoulder, amazed at how much he looked like his mother at that age. "Your wedding was beautiful. Rachel looked stunning." "She did, didn't she?" His face lit up the way it always did when he talked about her. "I'm really glad you two are getting along so well. It means everything to me." Getting along. If only he knew what his blushing bride had said about me just an hour ago. But this wasn't the time or place for that conversation. This was his wedding day, and I wouldn't be the one to ruin it for him. "Of course we are," I lied smoothly. "She's part of the family now." And that's when it hit me. The perfect, elegant solution to my Rachel problem. She was part of the family now, which meant she was my responsibility. And I took my responsibilities very seriously. The Monday morning after the wedding, I sat in my home office with my first cup of coffee and a notepad full of ideas. Rachel had made one critical mistake in her little show at the reception. She'd assumed I was exactly what I appeared to be, a retired man with no current business connections. But assumptions, as I'd learned over 25 years in business, are dangerous things. I picked up my phone and called a familiar number. "Marcus, it's David Mitchell. I hope you had a good weekend off." "Yes, the wedding was lovely. Thank you for asking. Listen, I need you to set up a meeting with the Johnson marketing team for this afternoon. And Marcus, make sure everyone understands this is confidential until I decide how to move forward." Marcus Thompson had been my business manager for 8 years. He knew exactly what that tone in my voice meant. Someone was about to have a very bad day, and I was going to enjoy every minute of it. By Tuesday, I had a complete file on Rachel Stevens Mitchell. Her work history, her college grades, her credit score, even her social media posts going back 4 years. Information is power, and I'd always believed in being completely prepared before making any important decisions. What I found was fascinating. Rachel had been with Johnson Marketing for 2 years, starting as a junior sales associate and working her way up to account representative. Her performance reviews were decent, but nothing special. She was hardworking, reliable, and ambitious. Exactly the kind of employee who did okay work, but would never change the world. More interesting were her social media posts. Instagram photos from expensive restaurants with captions about client meetings that happened on weekends. Facebook check-ins at luxury spas during what should have been workdays. And LinkedIn posts about networking events that looked suspiciously like vacation photos. But the real treasure was her expense account. Marcus's team had been very thorough. 2 years of questionable charges, creative descriptions of business expenses, and receipts that didn't quite make sense. Nothing illegal exactly, but definitely not the kind of financial judgment you'd expect from someone in her position. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Rachel had made the classic mistake of underestimating her opponent. She'd seen a gray-haired man in a conservative suit and assumed she was dealing with someone's father. Well, she was dealing with someone's father. She just hadn't bothered to find out whose father I was. By Wednesday, I'd made my decision. I called Marcus and asked him to schedule a meeting with Ms. Johnson for Thursday afternoon. Tell her it's about the future of her company's relationship with Mitchell Industries. And Marcus, make sure Rachel Stevens, sorry, Rachel Mitchell now, is included in the meeting. Thursday arrived gray and rainy, the kind of weather that makes everyone want to stay in bed. But I was up before sunrise, choosing my outfit with the same care a soldier might pick weapons for battle. I settled on my navy blue power suit, the one I'd worn to my first big presentation 20 years ago, paired with the watch Tommy's mother had given me for our 15th anniversary. Professional, authoritative, unmistakably in charge. The Johnson marketing office was exactly what I'd expected, all glass and steel with motivational posters about teamwork and thinking creatively. The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly styled hair and a nervous smile, announced my arrival with the kind of respect usually saved for visiting royalty. "Mr. Mitchell is here for his appointment with Ms. Johnson," she said into her headset, then turned to me with a bright smile. "She'll be right with you. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "Just coffee black," I said, settling into one of their uncomfortable modern chairs. The waiting area gave me a perfect view of the office floor, where I could see Rachel at her desk, typing frantically on her computer. She was wearing a sharp blue blazer and had her hair pulled back in a style that probably took an hour to create. Professional Rachel, ready to impress. She hadn't noticed me yet, which was perfect. I wanted the element of surprise. Ms. Johnson appeared exactly at 2 o'clock, followed by 2 other executives I didn't recognize, and bringing up the rear Rachel. She stopped dead when she saw me, her face going through confusion, recognition, and something that might have been panic. "Mr. Mitchell," Ms. Johnson said, extending her hand with a warm smile. "Thank you so much for coming in. I have to say, when your assistant called, we were all very excited about the possibility of working with Mitchell Industries." Rachel's face had gone pale. She was staring at me like I'd just walked through a wall. "The pleasure is mine," I said graciously, shaking her hand. "Though before we begin, I believe there's something we need to discuss about one of your employees." The conference room fell so quiet you could have heard a pin drop on the polished wood table. Rachel had gone from pale to green, and I was starting to worry she might actually faint. Ms. Johnson, meanwhile, was looking between us with the expression of someone who just realized they'd walked into a trap. "I'm sorry," she said slowly, "but I think there might be some confusion. This is Rachel Mitchell, one of our account representatives. She just got married this past weekend. And you're David Mitchell." "That's correct," I said pleasantly. "Rachel's new father-in-law and the owner of Mitchell Industries." I let that sink in for exactly 3 seconds before continuing. "The same Mitchell Industries that your company has been trying to land as a client for the past year." Rachel made a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. The 2 other executives, who I now realized were probably brought in to help pitch to Mitchell Industries, were staring at me like I'd just announced I was from another planet. "But at the wedding," Ms. Johnson stammered, "Rachel said you were unemployed. She called you a—" She trailed off, apparently realizing that repeating her employee's exact words might not be the wisest career move. "A deadbeat," I finished helpfully. "Yes, I remember, along with several other colorful descriptions, all delivered with such enthusiasm in front of your colleagues and my family." I opened my briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. Which brings us to why I'm really here today. Rachel finally found her voice. David, I can explain. It was wedding nerves, I didn't mean. Oh, but you did mean it, I said gently. In fact, you meant it so much that you called your friend immediately afterward to brag about how you'd put me in my place. Then your brother, then someone you called honey, which was particularly interesting since you just married my son. The color drained from Ms. Johnson's face. She was starting to understand that this wasn't just about hurt feelings. This was about her company's relationship with their most important potential client. Perhaps, I continued, opening the folder and spreading its contents across the conference table, we should discuss Rachel's performance as an employee before we talk about Mitchell Industries' business needs. The documents made a satisfying rustling sound as I arranged them. Expense reports, receipts, performance reviews, social media screenshots. 2 years of Rachel's professional life laid bare. Ms. Johnson's eyes widened as she scanned the papers. These are internal company documents. How did you? Due diligence, I said simply. When someone publicly humiliates me, I like to understand who I'm dealing with, and what I found was quite enlightening. I pointed to a particular expense report. This spa receipt from last February, for instance. Rachel claimed it was a team-building exercise, but according to the appointment records, it was actually a girls' day out with 3 of her college friends. Rachel's hands were shaking now. There must be some mistake. Or this hotel stay in Vegas last August, I continued, ignoring her protests. Billed as a marketing conference, but remarkably similar to the bachelorette party photos she posted on Instagram the same weekend. The ones where she's wearing a tiara and holding a drink, not attending seminars. One of the other executives, a man in his 50s with sharp eyes, leaned forward. Are you suggesting that Rachel has been falsifying expense reports? I'm not suggesting anything, I replied. I'm simply presenting facts and allowing you to draw your own conclusions. I pulled out another document. This is Rachel's LinkedIn profile from last week. Notice how she describes herself as senior sales manager and key decision maker at Johnson Marketing. Interesting title inflation for an account representative, don't you think? Ms. Johnson was practically sweating now. She'd obviously never looked closely at Rachel's social media presence, and what she was seeing wasn't painting a flattering picture of either her judgment or her honesty. Now, I said, closing the folder with a snap, let's talk about Mitchell Industries' business needs. We're looking for a marketing partner for our expansion into the Western markets. The contract would be worth approximately $8 million over 2 years. The room went dead silent. $8 million was probably more than Johnson Marketing made in total annual revenue. $8 million, Ms. Johnson repeated faintly. She looked like someone who'd just been offered a lifeline and a noose at the same time. The business opportunity was enormous, but Rachel's presence in the room was making it impossible for her to think clearly. Of course, I continued conversationally, Mitchell Industries has very strict standards when it comes to business ethics. We've found that companies with questionable internal practices tend to bring those same attitudes to their client relationships. I gestured to the documents still spread across the table. We simply can't afford to work with organizations that don't share our values. Rachel suddenly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is ridiculous. You can't do this to me because of some silly misunderstanding at a wedding. I looked at her with the same expression I might use to examine something unpleasant on the bottom of my shoe. Some silly misunderstanding, Rachel. You publicly humiliated me at my son's wedding, then bragged about it to multiple people. You've been inflating your job title, padding your expense reports, and apparently maintaining relationships that your new husband might find concerning. What relationships? She snapped, then immediately looked like she wished she could take the words back. The honey you called after the wedding, I said mildly. The one you told about how you'd handled your new father-in-law. I'm sure Tommy would be fascinated to learn about that conversation. Ms. Johnson cleared her throat. Perhaps we should take a short break, give everyone a chance to process this information. Actually, I said, standing up and gathering my documents, I think we're done here. Ms. Johnson, you have some decisions to make about your employee and your company's future. I'll be in touch next week to discuss whether Mitchell Industries will be moving forward with this partnership. I walked to the door, then turned back. Oh, and Rachel, you might want to update your LinkedIn profile. I have a feeling your job description is about to become much more accurate. The call came at 7:30 that evening while I was enjoying a beer on my back deck. Tommy's name appeared on my phone screen, and I could practically feel the panic radiating through the device before I even answered. Dad, what the hell did you do? I took a sip of beer and watched a blue jay land on my fence. Hello, son. How was your first day back from the honeymoon? Don't hello, son me. Rachel came home crying. She says you got her fired. I didn't get anyone fired, I said truthfully. I simply had a business meeting with her employer. A business meeting where you showed up as the owner of some company and ambushed her. Mitchell Industries isn't some company, Tommy. It's the company I've been running for the past 15 years. The company that paid for your college and law school. The company that bought your first apartment and your first car. I kept my voice level, though I could feel anger building in my chest. The company your wife never bothered to ask about. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then quietly, you're the owner of Mitchell Industries. I have been since your mother died. I kept our last name on the building because it was her dream too. But yes, I've been running it all this time. But you never said. You never talked about work. Because you never asked, I said gently. And because I wanted you to succeed on your own merit, not because people knew you were my son. I paused. Something your wife might have benefited from understanding before she decided to publicly call me a deadbeat. Another long silence. Then, she told me what she said at the wedding. She feels terrible about it. I'm sure she does, especially now that she knows who I am. Dad, please. She made a mistake, but she's my wife. Can't we find some way to work this out? That was the question I'd been dreading. Because the truth was, I could fix this with a phone call. I could make Johnson Marketing ignore Rachel's questionable expenses and inflated LinkedIn profile. I could hand them the $8 million contract and pretend none of this had happened. But that wouldn't teach Rachel anything. And more importantly, it wouldn't protect my son from the woman he'd married. Tommy, I said carefully, what exactly did Rachel tell you about why she lost her job? The silence stretched long enough that I began to wonder if the call had dropped. Then Tommy's voice came back, smaller than before. She said you were vindictive, that you couldn't handle a little joke at the wedding, so you used your business connections to destroy her career. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. Rachel had learned nothing from our encounter. Even faced with the consequences of her actions, she was still playing the victim. And what do you think about that explanation? I think. He paused, and I could practically hear him choosing his words carefully. I think there's probably more to the story. There is. Your wife has been falsifying expense reports for 2 years. She's been inflating her job title on professional networks. And she's been maintaining what appears to be a romantic relationship with someone she calls Honey. Someone she called immediately after our wedding to discuss how she'd handled me. The sound Tommy made was somewhere between a gasp and a groan. That can't be true. I have documentation, son. Phone records, social media posts, expense reports. I didn't manufacture evidence. I simply compiled what was already there. Why didn't you tell me this before the meeting with her boss? That was the question I'd been hoping he wouldn't ask, because the answer revealed something about me that I wasn't particularly proud of. Because I wanted her to have the chance to come clean on her own. I wanted to see if she would take responsibility for her actions or if she would continue to lie and manipulate. And she chose to lie. She did. Even when confronted with evidence, she blamed everyone except herself. I heard Rachel's voice in the background, shrill and demanding. Tommy's voice became muffled as he covered the phone, but I could still make out pieces of their argument. Her insisting that I was vindictive and cruel. Him asking about the expense reports and the phone calls. Her claiming everything was taken out of context. When Tommy came back on the line, his voice was different. Tired. Older. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Always. Did you plan this? The whole thing, letting her embarrass herself at the wedding, investigating her background, setting up that meeting. Did you orchestrate all of this? I looked out at my yard, where the evening light was turning everything golden. 15 years of building, a business had taught me that sometimes the most important battles are won not through direct confrontation, but through patience and preparation. I didn't plan for your wife to call me a deadbeat at your wedding, Tommy. But once she did, yes, I planned my response very carefully. And now she's lost her job, and Johnson Marketing probably won't get your contract. Actually, I said, allowing myself a small smile, I called Ms. Johnson this afternoon. Mitchell Industries will be moving forward with the partnership. Their company will get the contract, and they'll use the revenue to hire better employees with stronger ethical standards. As for Rachel, that's between her and her former employer, though I understand she'll be receiving an excellent reference letter that accurately reflects her 2 years of service. Tommy was quiet for so long that I began to worry about him. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I married someone I don't really know, didn't I? My heart broke a little for him. You married someone you thought you knew. Sometimes that's the same thing, and sometimes it isn't. The question now is what you're going to do with what you've learned. After we hung up, I sat on my deck until the stars came out. Rachel would land on her feet. People like her always did. She'd find another job, probably at a company that didn't do background checks quite as thoroughly. She might even learn something from this experience, though I doubted it. But Tommy would be okay. He was stronger than he knew and smarter than Rachel had given him credit for. And now he had all the information he needed to make his own decisions about his marriage and his future. As for me, well, I'd learned something too. I'd learned that after 15 years of being diplomatic and accommodating, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be anyone's doormat, even if it means your son has to face some hard truths about the woman he married. Especially then. Thanks for watching Iron Revenge. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.